Hi everyone, welcome to Creeps the series. My name is Lindsay and I'm one of the reference librarians at Radnor Memorial Library as well as the resident true crime junkie. I hope everyone is staying safe with all the holidays coming up. Things are about to get a little nuts again, it sounds like. So I hope everyone's, taking precautions. I'd like to thank everyone who watched our first episode, who shared, who commented, who the outpouring was just really cool. So I appreciate it. I really do. And I'm so glad you're here for this one, even if you're not. And the first one wasn't your thing, and this one probably won't be either. But even still, thank you. So today's case is the Cleveland Torso Killer, aka the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. Now, I recently read about this case in a book titled Elliot Ness and the Mad Butcher by Max Allan Collins. While I knew of the case, I didn't know the logistics of it until I actually did the research for this episode, and which involved reading the book. And I also wasn't aware of Elliot Ness playing a part in this, or just how many victims there were. So here we go. It's a doozy. So we're gonna start with the main players. Elliot Ness, yes, the guy I keep saying, yes, it is that Elliot Ness, the same untouchable Elliot Ness. Now you might wonder what's he doing in Cleveland. He's a Chicago guy. Well, actually, he did such a good job in Chicago that they transferred him to Cleveland because Cleveland was a bit of a hot mess at the time. So they figured, hey, well, you did a good job here. So the next guy, I am going to forewarn everyone, I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce this guy's last name. It could change 5 or 6 times during this episode. It is Merylo, so it's going to be a variation on Murillo or Merilo. So Peter, one of those two. This guy, this guy was about as problematic as detectives can get. He was stuck in like very old school ways. He didn't like Ness. He thought he was, I don't know. He tried everything in his power to one up the guy, and it just wasn't good. He's going to be a bit of a hindrance later on. So, our next two characters are Frank Dalzell and Francis Sweeney, our two suspects. Leonard Keeler, one of the inventors of the polygraph test, and finally, Congressman Martin L. Sweeney, yes, relation, first cousin to Francis Sweeney, our suspect. So we're going to start at the beginning here, because this goes on for quite a while. In 1934, Elliot Ness arrives in Cleveland. He's a clean-cut guy from Chicago. He's a really good dude. He was one of Capone's escorts when he was arrested. He's just an all-around kind of chill, very, very with it kind of guy. He loves what he does. He's good at it. And by bringing this ethic with him to Cleveland, he very methodically starts to clean it up. And all of this brings us to 1935. All of this gets him to the safety director position in the city. He's appointed, and I actually didn't know what a safety director was until I read this book. And it turns out that they actually control both the fire department and the police throughout the entire city. So in this position, he made it his job to weed out like crooked cops, bad cops who used to take bribes from mobsters and protect gambling places. So he also shut down illegal gambling places. He lowered juvenile delinquency, and he cracked down on traffic violations because apparently they were a problem. So he's about to face a very different problem though here. Two headless male bodies are found in a rundown area of town known as Jackass Hill, which I would really love to know the reason behind that name. Both bodies are missing limbs and heads, and only one of those heads is ever going to be found. And only one of these bodies will ever be positively identified as a man named Edward Andrassy. The other becomes John Doe number one in what will eventually become known as the Cleveland Torso Killings. So they don't have any evidence to go on here, and forensics is really in its infancy at this time, so not much can be done at this point. It looks simple enough. Two bodies are dumped, could have been a revenge killing, or could have generally been the work of anybody, except for one thing. the bodies have been precision cut, almost surgically. And one of the bodies was treated with a chemical that preserved it, turning the skin red. So they start to think that maybe this is a doctor or a med school student of some sort. So, pun completely intended, Ness is at a dead end. And the case gets put aside. So then, throughout 1936 and 1937, 7 more bodies are found in this fashion. Some are found in or near water at this time, but the MO is always the same. Always the same. One of them is Florence Polillo, a known prostitute, and one of the only other victims identified. One other woman was found, the only African American in the entire victim pool, is a possible Rose Wallace, but it's never been confirmed. So another one is the tattooed man, a man covered in names, distinctive tattoos, but no one can ever identify him, which just sounds very strange because if this guy's as distinctive as they say, somebody should have known who this guy was. They even made a death mask of him, put it up at an expo that thousands of people walked past, and no name still ever came of it. So while they're found linearly, one after the other, the order of their deaths is not. So some are found weeks, months, even a year after being murdered. And to make things really weird, 2 of these bodies are placed in direct view of Elliot Ness's office window at City Hall. Yeah, so then 1938 starts. Ness gets word about this incident that took place earlier where a transient male made a report to the police about being drugged by a doctor in a townhome. He said he'd been offered dinner at the doctor's home and ended up blacking out. When he woke up, things just seemed a little off and he got scared. So he ran, he took off, and luckily he got out. However, when he was taken back to the area to confirm his story, he wasn't able to place which of those townhouses was the correct one. So Ness begins combining theories that maybe the murders are the work of a doctor and that this townhouse doctor might be the guy involved. So we're going to fast forward a little bit. Ness gets word of a disgraced doctor by the name of Francis Sweeney. He's been in and out of halfway houses for years. He's been in trouble with the law. He's got a ton of mental problems. Like this guy is a loose cannon. So Ness decides to go check him out and brings him to a hotel to question him. During this time, he gets a hold of Leonard Keeler because he's heard about the polygraph test and he wants to kind of test it out, see if it's usable. It's not admissible in court, though, unfortunately, but Ness thinks that it might at least prove some kind of guilt, maybe even get a confession. I'm going to make a note here and say I don't remember how long they held him in the hotel room. I feel like it was a couple of days. And during this time, they actually had officers stationed in the room with Sweeney. The weird thing is the officers didn't like this guy. They were creeped out by him, and they said there was just something off about this guy. He really rattled these guys. So, okay, so they go on with the polygraph test, and Sweeney fails it twice with flying colors. Ness can't get a confession out of him, and the whole situation is a wash, so they let him go. The pressure at this point is on them to take down this murder. And while Ness is starting to believe that Sweeney is their guy, seeing that his times in and out of the halfway houses match up with the times of the murders, as well as the townhome on that street being confirmed to have been his, a different one of the townhomes at least, Ness hits another snag. Sweeney is the first cousin of a prominent congressman, Martin L. Sweeney, who works closely with Elliot Ness. And with this information, Ness can't really arrest Sweeney without facing some sort of political backlash. So he's a little screwed here. We're going to pause a moment and we're going to talk about Peter Merlo, one of the detectives on the case. And during the time that Ness is investigating Sweeney, Peter Merlo hears about other cases in other states, and they seem to fit the MO. So he goes and follows up on those leads. He even goes as far as Pittsburgh and other parts of PA to see if, these murders are the work of the same guy. However, they're not, even though he declares them similar. Coroner's records, they have literally nothing to do with the Cleveland murders, and some of them aren't even remotely similar to the Cleveland murders. So I don't know what this guy was doing, but yeah, he's going to become a bit of a problem later on in the next year here. So it's now 1939. A suspect by the name of Frank Dalzell shows up, and the police bring him in. He's a gay man. He's known to hang out in nightclubs, and was only pointed out because he knew Florence Polillo, who was mentioned earlier, one of the earlier victims. So, bringing back Peter Merylo here, he declares that this guy is the killer and locks him up with pretty much no precedence whatsoever. Dalzell passes all of his polygraph tests, and if I can recall correctly, he refuses to confess. However, a few beatings later, he does, but immediately says that they were false. However, Peter Merylo takes these confessions as the gospel and announces to the entire city that Dalzell is the killer, and the case is closed. Behind bars, Dalzell tries to tell police that he's being beaten in jail and other people that he's getting roughed up, and no one makes any kind of move to help this kind of poor guy. He never makes it to trial. He's found dead in a cell from mysterious circumstances, and pretty sure those mysterious circumstances were him being beaten to death. So now Ness is down two suspects, and it seems, though, that the killing has stopped. There was a similar murder in 1950, but it's never been confirmed to be linked to this series. What we're left with is a total of 12 victims, 7 male, 5 female. So what happened? Essentially, it was a case of too many cooks in the kitchen. Merylo had it out for Ness and trying constantly to outdo this guy. It was poor tactics. They burnt down shanty towns to see if, they could find this guy. They didn't save evidence, and it was just absolutely nothing bad, but dead ends made for a stunningly bad case. So, is this solved or unsolved? Honestly, I think Ness was right. I think it was Sweeney. So in a way, it was solved because Sweeney was more than likely the man they were looking for. Sweeney even made a confession of sorts years later. He locked on to Ness, and he targeted him and his family and sent him postcards taunting him and talking about the crimes, making fun of his name, and more or less straight up owning up to the murders. So Ness passed away in 1957 in his house of a heart attack in Coudersport, PA. And Sweeney died in 1964 in a veterans hospital in Dayton, Ohio. Finally closing the chapter on this case for good and leaving it more or less open-ended. I do think Sweeney was the guy. There are plenty of historians that believe this as well, but with the serial killer, though, there's always other theories, and some have an inkling that maybe this was more than one person or a copycat, or that Sweeney had a partner. But considering how much is against Sweeney, I think it's pretty safe to say that Ness was on the right track. Now, before I start with the recommendations, I want to make a shout out to Coudersport, PA, for starting up Nessfest 2 years ago. It really kind of looks like a fun time. Check out their, the town website. It looks awesome. So, one book. I enjoyed Elliot Ness and the Mad Butcher, but it's centered more on Ness's career than anything else. If you want more in depth of the case, In the Wake of the Butcher by James Jessen Badal is the way to go. I think that's how you say Badal, maybe. One Podcast, Most Notorious, has an episode featuring James Badal about the book and has an in-depth interview with him about it. This one's a little harder. One documentary and one show. Pretty sure there was an unsolved mysteries about this from the original series back in the 80s, but there hasn't been much since. However, one documentary does exist called The 14th Victim, and the only place I could find it was on VHS. So there's no telling where somebody with, you know, great Googling skills might be able to find it though. So if you see it, let me know how it is. So that's a wrap. And I know it's going to be weird this year, but I hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving. And until next time, stay safe, have a great rest of your week, and thanks for watching. I will see everyone at the library. Bye.